Welcome to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fauscette. Each week, we interview experts in artificial intelligence, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. Our show today is When AI Does the Building, Innovation, Ideation, and the New Creative Advantage. I'm joined by Dr. Alex Mehr, founder and CEO of Famous Labs. Alex, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate you joining, and I think this is going to be a fun conversation just to get us started, because you have a very interesting background and kind of what I'd say an extraordinary path from where you were to where we are. So I'd love to know a little bit more about it. I mean, obviously, PhD in mechanical engineering, and you've worked at NASA Ames Research Center. You were co-founder of Zoosk, which I think a lot of people will recognize. And now, founding Famous Labs. How does that journey unfold for you, and what drew you into the AI space?
Yeah, so growing up, I never really wanted to be, and never thought about even becoming an entrepreneur. My family was very academic oriented. So my goal was to grow up, become a physicist and become a scientist and become a university professor. So it wasn't really like early 20s in grad school that the thought even crossed my mind, believe it or not. And then when I was working at NASA Ames Research Center in California near San Francisco, that's when I did kind of through osmosis. I kind of started picking up entrepreneurship language and seeing people that are doing startups and stuff like that. And I decided to try my hand at it. And and it's like crossing the Rubicon. Once you becoming an entrepreneur, you've crossed the Rubicon, and now all of a sudden there's no going back. Actually, I even continued publishing papers. Because everybody was telling me your research academic career is going to be jeopardized, blah blah blah. So I even like the first 2-3 years of Zoosk, I kept publishing research papers around my website, just so I have the option of going back to academia. But you know how it is. Once you go into entrepreneurship, there's no going back.
Yeah, it is very difficult to come back from for a lot of reasons, I guess. But if it's something that excites you, it really excites you, and it's definitely hard to get that out of your blood, I think.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, so when we were doing our prep conversation, you said something that really stuck with me. You said that as an engineering major, you always thought of engineering as this superior field of study, but now because AI can handle a lot of the execution, taste, creativity, knowing what works in the market are probably matter much more than just the straight engineering piece. Can you expand that a little bit? I mean, what does that shift mean for how businesses should think about their competitive advantage?
Yeah, it is a massive shift. And I can tell you as a tech entrepreneur, I've been a tech entrepreneur since 2007, and I had a large engineering team, 2010, 11, 12. I wouldn't say engineering is no longer useful. I think engineering thinking and scientific thinking is useful. But what actually moves the needle is no longer your ability to code or be super technically detailed in the specific aspects of engineering than it is to have a high level understanding. Plus, this is the key difference, what I call taste, meaning, to give you a specific example, when I used to hire engineers, or when I hired engineers in the past, I would give them technical questions. Right. Nowadays, we don't do that at all. Essentially, we just make sure that the person actually has some understanding of engineering principles. But then the real questions are things like, okay, what have you built? Let me look at it. And then it is like, why does it look that way? Why does this workflow? Why did you do it that way versus this way? So that is not a technically like a technical question. That is a judgment, taste question. So engineering's job has completely shifted from, oh, I know how to code in React and I know all the libraries and all that, to I understand what a product should look like, what it should do for the user, what's a value proposition to the user, those kind of things. It's a massive shift. I know it sounds minor, but it's actually massive. And if someone who's listening to this, they are engineers, I am confident this is a trend that is going to continue. In other words, try to hone your common sense, your judgment versus, oh, I know exactly how to write this piece of code that does something very specific.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, last summer I was talking with the CTO of one of my larger software clients, and they had been investing heavily in growing AI capabilities in their tech team development teams, and I asked him, I thought, so if with this, are you looking at a large reduction in the number of engineers, or how do you think about that? Where's the real value in this for you? And what about those younger engineers? How do we get them in the pipeline and have them be senior engineers someday? And his answer I thought was really good. He said that he didn't believe that the number of engineers should change at all. He said his thought was we need to retrain them and refocus them so that, in fact, what they are is providing much more of a conceptual view. What do you want this to do? How do you want this to do something? And almost in an architectural role too, right? And I thought that was really interesting because obviously we've heard so much noise about, oh, it's going to take all the entry level development jobs, and of course, if you step back from that and you go, yeah, well, if you do that, then there's no more senior developers down the road, right? Because eventually they're going to die.
Yeah.
It's it doesn't make sense. So I thought that was really interesting. Their approach was very different. It was more about how do you educate them in a different way or in a new role so they understand that what they know still applies, but it needs to be applied in a slightly different way. And judgment, I think, is a great word to use there.
Yeah.
Because that does definitely tie the human piece of it in, right?
Yeah, so I think there's going to be a short-term gap in the pipeline in the sense that there are still people that are going through, let's say, computer science school or whatever engineering school, and they're not fully trained on how to leverage AI.
Yep.
And then, therefore, they're going to have a hard time coming into engineering organizations because they're looking for hiring senior people that they can be augmented with AI instead of junior engineers. Does that make sense?
Yep.
But I think that's very short term, and it probably is starting to change anyways, because the younger generation is already picking up AI coding tools.
Right.
And by the time they're ready for the job market, they already can work like a senior engineer because augmented with AI, they can, whatever they don't know, they can do anyways. Yeah. So I think that gap might be real. I understand the concern, but I think it's much smaller than people realize, and it probably is already dissolving itself. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, it does make sense. I mean, I think you're right. And from what I've seen, in general, I would say that, the even places where they did lay off some junior engineers or perhaps didn't hire some people that they had planned, you see them backtrack with that after a period of time, right?
Yes.
Oh, we had to hire these back, or we had to hire different people, whatever. Which I think is a testament to that. And I guess the only reservation, and you kind of hinted at it too, is that in the education pipeline, if you're not embracing it, that that is a problem.
Yes.
And a lot of it ends up being individual, right? Because
Yes.
some institutions now are still kind of burying their head in the sand, as it were.
Yeah. And I tell you something, I think, you would find me as like middle of the ground. I'm not super like cheerleader optimistic percent, but also I think a lot of concerns are overblown. For example, people look at layoffs at large organizations and like, oh, look, it's already happening. And like, whatever company, large company laid off 10% of their employees and whatever.
Mhm.
And I'm like, look, go back in history. Layoffs haven't happened. The companies grow and a lot of times unchecked. And then they look for excuses to lay off the underperformers.
Right.
And that excuse has a different flavor every few years. This is
Yep.
just that. It's a little bit of adjustment. The companies are
Yeah.
taking the opportunity to lay off and right size themselves. And the excuse they use is AI. Again, I'm not being like I'm not a cheerleader. I'm a very pragmatic person.
Right.
But I think it's not, the sky's falling type scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that makes sense to me. If you think about the history of tech in general, you're right. The regularity of layoffs is not something that, this doesn't throw things off. It doesn't make me believe, all of a sudden, we're seeing this apocalypse come when in fact we know that, layoffs is a part of it. And in fact, in the sales world, it's kind of common knowledge that layoffs are just a regular thing because there are, underperformers that you need to get out of the organization. And, so I think that makes a lot of sense. And the other thing is too, if you look at history, we had the Industrial Revolution's a good analog to this. And if you look at it in detail, you'll see that, a lot of people did lose their jobs, but they either retrained or they just simply fell out of the workforce completely because they just chose not to do anything about their fact that their skills were just antiquated at the time. Right.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. And I think that parallel to Industrial Revolution is it's a good analogy. Now, it's not exactly, I want to say, would it turn out exactly? No. But, they say history repeats itself, but it rhymes, but it doesn't repeat itself. It kind of rhymes.
It does rhyme. Yeah, it definitely does rhyme. Yeah. Well, so at Famous Labs, you described it as a research lab that, constantly launches new products. And so you have Deal.ai for marketing content, Famous.ai for e-commerce, Heisenberg for drug discovery. That's a wide portfolio. I mean, what ties that all together? And how do you think about the innovation process inside your own company?
Yeah. So one of the changes, if people are listening, for people who are entrepreneurs and listening to this, I think the AI revolution will enable idea people, like idea machines, I call them. Yeah. And again, I don't want to talk in extremes, but in the balance between, I have a lot of ideas and let me pursue a lot of them, versus do one thing and focus on that one thing. It used to be that it was very, like in business specifically, it was very focused on one thing and do one thing oriented. I think the needle has moved a little bit towards the middle, meaning it actually, because execution is a lot easier, people who have a lot of ideas, they are able to execute multiple ideas because execution with AI has become easier. For some people, it's good news. For some people, it's bad news. For people who are like, constantly full of ideas and all that, it is an enablement tool.
Yep.
For people who are super focused on one thing and they're afraid of change, I highly encourage them to basically revive that playful inner child again and start playing with new ideas. Because if you sit still on one thing in a rapidly shifting market, the chances of your business not becoming relevant is just now low.
Right.
So it's, software is no longer, it used to be that you could build a SaaS company and, and your moat was your software. Well,
Right.
no more.
No.
So, yeah, so you better get moving. And like I said, for some people, that's good news. For some, bad news. My overall philosophy is this. We remain the ultimate playground, okay, for really smart people that I've assembled in my team, the ultimate playground. Everything is on the table. If I can build a product that helps people in some way or form, we will attempt it and try to build it. I have a few things on what kind of ideas to pursue. I have to see that it's useful to people. I also try to do products that are, I call them human-centric, meaning it adds value without taking value from another human. So it's like essentially like ads. I mean, obviously with AI, you can do things that removes humans, but I try to do things that are additive. And if it has those, then it's fair game. And we play with it. And if it makes sense, we continue playing with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, that is something that I've seen my own, use of the tools and in other companies that I've been working with that are, implementing agentic AI across a lot of different functions. And one of the things too that I learned over time is just sitting with like Claude Coworker, for example, which is an excellent tool for the kind of work I do. People will see something that I put out, they'll go like, what was the prompt that you used to get this? And often I have to go, there's not a prompt per se. There's a long conversation that took 2 hours to go through to get to the end result, but there's no prompt, right? Because it's different than generative. When you think of, I'm going to tell it, tell A and B and it's going to get C out of it. That's just not the way this works. It's a much more iterative, interactive process.
Yeah, and I think that's actually one of what you just talked about. That is one of the misconceptions out there. So I think if you think of AI, people might disagree with me, but I'm at this point in my life, I don't care. So new AI models are very much similar to human brain, just even structurally. So imagine you hired a new person and you wanted to give them a task. You don't come up with one massive instruction or prompt, and then you give it to them and they come back with a great product. Essentially, what happens after a while, you say, oh, this person has been with us for 2 years. Now they can almost read my mind. Okay. What is that? That is essentially like 2 years of chat history and feedback that has trained that person's human in AI language. The context window is built up. So the person creates the thing that you envision with very few words. If you think about AI that way, then all these things what's a magic prompt? It's just, I'm like, there's no magic prompt.
I mean, and that's hard, I think, for some people to get. But if you use this and you do this for a very, short period of time, you actually, to get what you want out of it, you do have to understand that. To me, at least, I treat more like a human worker than I do a tool. Right. And I think that was part of my mental shift. Once I started to think of them as coworkers, then I started to, interact with them in ways that took advantage of that context window that got much bigger, memory, which, is a part of that channel history kind of idea. And those things have changed the way the tools work tremendously. And certainly, that is the enabler for successful agentic AI for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, you talked a bit about the ideation to output pipeline, and that's an interesting piece, and that's something that comes up a lot in my conversations with clients about innovation, right? How do we go, ideation to output? What should that look like? And execution becomes easier with AI. So bottlenecks have moved maybe upstream to the ideation
Yes.
part, or taste, as you called.
Yeah.
For a business leader, what's a practical AI powered innovation workflow look like? What sparks the idea, and then all the way through, producing it or launching it, a service or product.
You want to know my workflow, how we come up with ideas?
Mhm.
Okay. It is not for everybody, but I'll tell you guys anyways. So we have about 30 or so people in my company. And what I have found, and I've been doing this for over 2 years now, very different than how I used to do. So, but this is how we do it. With a group of my team members, we are actually sort of like a hybrid remote with a small office in Florida kind of setup. What we do is that you may call it offsite, but it is not exactly an offsite. We kind of converge in a city and either get multiple hotel rooms or a big Airbnb. And we just spend like a few days together. And it's funny how every breakthrough we've had, like in terms of ideas, big things to do, pretty much has come from that process. So essentially getting a bunch of really smart people into a literal hotel room and spending many hours, maybe TVs running in the background. We talk a little bit about maybe a basketball game is going on or whatever. And we're talking things. It's like, hey, how about this? Da-da. And then we're like, no. And then the other person comes up with another thing, and it's, no, that makes no sense. I know. And then we mock something and we look at it like, no. And then eventually breakthrough happens. So in a world of remote communication and Zoom and technology and AI and everything, the seed that gives you that breakthrough idea is a bunch of smart people in a room. So I think that's really the core. I literally gave you the secret sauce.
So no, that is, I mean, certainly from an experience, I would say that I've seen that happen many times with, with teams and offsites, and just getting to kind of neutral ground and having it open to brainstorm and think through things and talk through problems, that sort of thing. That makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
We mentioned Heisenberg as one of the companies, the ideas that you've been working with. And I, not to spend a ton of time digging into how this worked, but I'm curious because you've called it, cursor for chemist.
Yeah.
And quantum informed AI system for small molecule drug discovery. That's a mouthful, but that's different from marketing or finance or operations, right?
Yes.
So what made you go into biotech? And then, how does this actually tell us where, vertical AI is heading, perhaps?
Yeah, vertical AI is going to be huge. Just to put in perspective. And it is huge already. I don't even know. There are many very big AI vertical companies. Now, so essentially, just so people understand, AI models like Anthropic, OpenAI, they are general AI. They're trained on a huge data set, and they have a very specific purpose, which is to do a lot of things, even though they might be better in some aspects than others. But in general, they're generalized. But then you have things like, okay, so how would a chemist use AI to do drug discovery? That is not a ChatGPT prompt.
If it is, it's one I've never seen.
It is essentially a combination of, LLMs, but also foundation models that are trained on chemistry. They're not even text-based. They are like molecular models. And then a specific, what's called a harness that is built on top that can keep track of, okay, so this is what we need to do. This is my target, and these are the candidates. And Now let's feed this candidate with reasoning into this model, try to create more candidates. Then now let's simulate what happens with that drug candidate, and then run a bunch of other libraries to see, okay, so if this drug candidate is toxic, what kind of properties does it have, and things like that. So a chemist looking at it, they understand. Non-chemists will not understand, but chemists looking at it understand what's going on, and they can modify it. And I use the example of Cursor for chemists. But I believe the Cursor, for people who don't know, like Cloud Code Cursor, they are coding tools for software engineers. So it's a harness that it's like a coding environment. Software engineers can go in. It understands like code repositories and things like that, and allows a software engineer to do their job faster using AI. Well, so that has already like permeated throughout the software engineering industry. But then I look at it and I'm like, okay, the world is not just software engineers. There are all sorts of people. There are mechanical engineers, civil engineers, electrical engineers, so aerospace engineers, chemists, physicists. So what is the equivalent of that workflow for them? And it also makes sense why Cursor popped in the market first, because who are building AI models? Software engineers. So what's the first tool they built? A software engineering tool, because they understand it. Does that make sense?
Right? Wouldn't you do that if you were an engineer?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like they understand that. But how about the chemist? How about the physicist? How about the aerospace engineer? So that is, I think, is the next evolution. You call it vertical AI. I totally agree, and I'm going to try to make as many of them as I can myself to help those people, essentially. So essentially, a chemist should not be going to ChatGPT and saying, "Hey, here's that just is not built for that," so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because that was kind of a revelation for me last year as I was using the models more and playing around with different tools and talking to different people, that, there are a lot of professions that are very specialized. There are a lot of companies and industries that require a lot of specialty, right? The vocabulary is different, the approaches are different, workflows are different. So, I mean, it seems to me that the output from what you're saying really is specialized models, no matter what the size, right? It might be a small model, it might be
smaller. They're smaller normally. Yeah.
Then that is, that's the future of vertical AI, is the capability to build out these specialty models that can really cater to the needs of a specific population, whether that's an industry or a person, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like a model that you give it. For example, let's say material engineers, or chemical engineers, you give it a compound, some sort of material, and it gives you other similar things like that. Does that make sense? Like, how about this one instead of that other one? So that is a very specific product that is not general ChatGPT, and it shouldn't, because it's like, even in your own brain, you have different parts of your brain. They have completely different specialties. You have like part of your brain that's responsible for hearing, vision, motion control. So it's like there's all sorts of different specialties in our brain, and it's not some monolithic one AI model that rules them all type thing. Right. So there are huge opportunities there. It's just starting to be explored, and I think it's very exciting for everyone out there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it does provide a lot of opportunity, and particularly the idea of sizing the model, making it specialized, but sizing it to the use case. And, then you get much more, economies of use there and that sort of thing as well.
Yeah, and also reinforcement learning of that is a lot easier, because you don't have to train on the world. You train on, if it's chemistry, you just make sure the output on like molecules that come out makes sense. Does that make sense? It is a much in a way, I mean, it's like positives and negatives. It's a much smaller problem set, but the depth you have to go to make it good is much deeper. Does that make sense? So it's
Yeah.
like it needs to be really good at what it does.
Yeah, I mean, broad models solve generic or broader, types of
Yes.
questions, but very specialized models then are for specialized industry questions, professional questions, whatever it might be, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we've had what some people have called the SaaS-pocalypse, which I kind of like better than SaaS-pocalypse, but they could both work, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's over the last 6 months or so. Certainly, the markets have reacted to this narrative that SaaS is being replaced. It's companies aren't going to buy it anymore. They're going to, I don't know, go in a closet over the weekend and use cloud code to build a new ERP system or something. And you push back on that really hard.
Yeah.
And so, you pointed out, nobody's going to vibe code their payroll, which
Yes.
yes, that makes sense. And when where do you see the real opportunities for disruption versus like where the existing enterprise software still makes sense?
Yeah. So I think that is another thing. It's just it wouldn't change like this happens. People tend to go to extremes.
Yeah.
Like it's like I'm like it's neither this or that. It's in the middle. So the truth is SaaS solutions inside companies. A lot of them have a moat that is not just because somebody coded it. It is testing, compliance, integration with existing systems. Like you don't want to take a chance on your payroll system. You don't want to take a chance on your inventory management system. You don't want to take a chance on like, let me just go and wipe code an electronic medical record and put my patients in there so I don't pay for EMR. First of all, you will not be compliant to begin with. So it goes a lot to making sure the software is compliant and it works and is tested. Also, because these software companies have a lot of clients, they have engineers and they deal with bugs across a lot of clients to make sure their software works. Now, obviously, there are flaws in that too, but you can pretty much rest assured that your payroll system is not gonna make a mistake and deduct the right amount of taxes, and your EMR is not gonna put the x-ray for one patient into another patient's file and stuff like that, right? So those things, I don't see even I call it reason for existence. I don't even see a reason why a hospital system will try to vibe code their EMR. I just don't. Or a large retail store with multiple like warehouses shipping things with trucks all over the place to their locations, all of a sudden saying, you know what, we don't want ERP, we are going to unleash our engineers. They come up with a whole routing and trucking and inventory management system. That company will collapse.
Yes.
So it's like I'm like, okay, now are there other companies, SaaS companies that are like completely cosmetic? Yes, there are some. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and also the other thing, what's the upside of this is actually for SaaS companies, and I have no dog in this game because I'm an AI company, but there are SaaS companies. The upside for the SaaS companies is now they can implement AI to make their product better, to make it integrate with other solutions with AI. So data consolidation becomes a lot easier. Yeah. So there's actually upside for a lot of SaaS companies, and there are some SaaS companies that are going to be destroyed because they added no value, had no reason to exist to begin with anyway. So the truth, like I said, in my opinion, somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, I think that to me, as I've thought about this and looked at it more, I can see the pricing problem because that kind of jumps out at you, right? Like maybe per seat pricing doesn't really work in a consumption-based world. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But when you think about, I'm going to go, vibe code an ERP system, no thank you. Like, no thanks. Because the problem is the moat is not your ability to approach that, or even understand kind of what you're trying to do with it. The problem it lies underneath it, right? Now, the data is
Yes.
one problem, and you've got to certainly get that in a usable format, but you can, there are ways around that, right? I mean, you can federate the data, you can move it all into a data lake, whatever. But but when you move above that one level, the business logic, you can't recreate business logic automatically, magically, right? It doesn't do that. If there's a moat there, that, to me, that jumps out as a real technical challenge that I'm not willing to try. I mean, there are certainly simple little programs and projects that I would take on that don't require me to rebuild rebuild the Empire State Building with matchsticks. I mean, that's, no thanks. But at the same time, a lot of those things are, for me, very protected.
Yeah.
For now, anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think you are thinking about it the right way, in the sense that if you're in SaaS, what you should think about, business SaaS, what you should think about is, okay, hopefully your SaaS, I mean, there are SaaS companies that, like I said, that's going to go away. But if you're one of those core ones, the question you need to be asking yourself is that, how can I use AI to make my tool 10 times better? That's really the one question you need to be asking yourself. If you're in payroll and employee review systems and stuff like that, you're like, how can I, and one way to think about it is like, how can I use AI to make my tool 10 times less painful to use for the HR manager in the company? So that's the question. You answer that, I think overall you're going to be fine.
Yeah. And I mean, I see this in a lot of applications where the UI starts to shift towards, an agentic way of approaching it, right? Yes. Conversational or other methods of interacting and having the agent execute things. So I can see change, but at the same time, it doesn't seem to me like we're quite at the apocalypse yet.
Yeah.
I mentioned thinking of AI as a digital workforce, and I so take that a little bit further. If I'm a company, I have human workers. I now could have digital workers. I put them together. I have a hybrid workforce. To me, that seems like the real concept of where we are right now. I'm not saying that someday, it might replace everybody or whatever, but as far as I can see right now, that hybrid workforce makes sense when you talk about how do you move businesses forward right now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, given the way Famous Labs is, focusing on all these different tools and a lot of it's, specialized, that sort of thing, where do you see the line between, what AI should own and what humans should be in the lead for?
Yeah. Okay. Again, it's again
easy question, right?
Yeah, easy question. Easy question. Hard. It's easy question. Hard to answer. I think essentially, if anyone in your company is not effectively leveraging AI, and I say that for knowledge workers, so maybe physical, like it's different, but even in those scenarios, you need to give them the AI tools. But knowledge worker not leveraging AI, there is a problem. Okay, so it's like there's a problem. Now it may be a small problem that is irrelevant, or for example, if your receptionist is not using some sort of agentic workflow, I'm gonna take literally receptionist at a dental office. Okay. So they need to be enabled using some sort of AI tool to do a better job of following up with patients and giving them more customized experience, versus if it is like before where they just take a call and then put on a calendar, and then that needs to be replaced to, now my receptionist has this tool that it automatically reminds people to do something. If there's a text message, if the customer can message the receptionist, AI replies back and says, hey, I can do this, we can do that. If they have a question, I can answer that. And then the human supervises, meaning the receptionist becomes a supervisor of that AI agent. If you're not doing that, you're underutilizing your person. Does that make sense? So now the question is, okay, so does it really matter to your business? I agree. Sometimes it doesn't matter. It's like, it's fine. It's like not that big of a line item for my business. I don't want to go through the hassle of doing it. The person has been working here for 20 years. I understand it. That's like practical. But if you do that across your company and like just ignore enabling people with AI altogether across the company, and you are in a competitive business, you will eventually go out of business. Does that make sense? So you need to sort of start thinking about how can I enable my people with AI at all times, and what other superpower I can unlock for them. And you should certainly do that with all the key roles of your company. Now, some businesses are like, okay, so let's say a window manufacturing company in Tennessee has a lock on the market, and maybe if they don't do anything, they just keep doing the same thing. Maybe it doesn't make a difference. But if you're in a competitive business, you have to do that, or other people will eat your lunch, essentially. Yeah.
Well, so a lot of the audience are business leaders, and part of what we've really tried to do with the show is distill these concepts down so that it is appropriate and understandable from a business perspective, right? How do I use this today to change something? Yeah. And so I'm curious if you were going to give some advice, particularly around innovation. How should executives think about that? What should they do to plug AI into that innovation process? And what's the first experiment they should do, maybe, or how should they think about this?
Yeah, I think I'll answer that in two ways: strategically and tactically. Okay. So strategically, just know, especially knowledge work type companies, physical is a little bit different, but knowledge work type companies. Strategically, what is happening is you're offering a specific product and service. That same customer has needs for other products and services. You can build that other product and service yourself and horizontally expand, meaning sell more things to the same customer, okay? If you refuse to do that, just know it is easier for your competitor to also build your product and service and come to your market. So there's a little bit of a game theory dynamics going on where companies have to expand their product portfolio and offering, because if they don't, other people will come into their territory. To give you a little bit of a historical funny tidbit, and hopefully I don't I say this one right. So New Zealand, many years ago, used to be multiple little kingdoms and tribes. And the reason that no kingdom or tribe could take over the whole island was because in order to march from one side of the island to the other side, you had to pack a lot of calories, and they had like sweet potatoes, if I'm not mistaken, and they didn't pack enough calories. So they couldn't, the truth was, it was like fragmented, because you couldn't really get a bunch of men, march all the way, and the food would be too heavy or not enough of it. The moment potatoes, if I'm not mistaken, hopefully I get this right, was introduced, and potatoes are more calorie dense, then you could get a group of people march across the island and have food rations for them, okay? It became one. So there's actually all the warring tribes, it became one. So the reason I say that is because exactly that same thing is happening with AI. So people can easily go into each other's market now with AI because execution is easy. So it was fragmented and you felt safe with your customer base. Don't feel safe. It's like other people can go into your territory. You can go into their territory. It's the same customer. You expand your portfolio. You may replace someone else if they expand their portfolio. It doesn't make sense. I'm not saying it's a zero-sum game, but there's a little bit of that dynamic is going on strategically, just so people know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Was that clear, by the way? It's like my
Yeah,
example.
no, that makes sense. I mean, if it kind of reminds me of that old saying that armies march on their stomachs, right? I mean, that
Yes,
is
exactly.
that
yeah.
is in fact the reality of it. If you
Yes.
can't provision them, they're not going to get very far. So.
Yeah, and with AI, essentially what has happened is that you can go further. You can take your army further. So that means you have to. Now, from a tactical perspective, what I do is sort of simple. I sort of ask, okay, so I have a person that is doing this job in a company. How can I make them accomplish more, or produce more, or provide more value to the customer, or reduce the pain of their day-to-day work? Okay, with what AI tools are possible, and you have to tactically, systematically ask that question across your company at all times.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, and I think if I think about how companies are using today, that ties right in. Really interesting conversation, but before I let you go, though, I like to do this at the end of every show. I like to, try to get a recommendation of somebody. Could be a thought leader, an author, podcaster, whatever you think would be relevant for the audience. Well, somebody that you think they would enjoy and they should check out.
I have a lot, but if I had to have to pick one, Nassim Taleb is probably the person to follow. His book Antifragile is still one of my favorite books. And I like him because the concepts, he's really good at putting a new thought in your head. So it's like, and give it a word, like Black Swan, Antifragile. So give it a word and a new concept that then you can carry with yourself. That's why I recommend it.
Yeah. No, that's great. No, thank you. That definitely is interesting, and folks should check that out for sure. Well, Alex, thanks so much for joining. I really appreciate it. And, hopefully this will generate some interesting conversations, but really, really appreciate you joining today.
Thank you for having me.
And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the show. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review to help others find us. For more research on AI and other software, check out arianresearch.com. If you're an expert in AI, generative AI, or business automation, either as a provider or an end user, email your information to disambiguation@arianresearch.com. Don't forget to join us next week. Disambiguation is an Arian Research production. I'm Michael Fauscette, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.